Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. The high-intensity war which Israel has waged simultaneously on several, perhaps 7 fronts, has been dialed down somewhat after the successful campaigns against the Iranian proxy Hezbollah, then the remnants of the Assad regime, and now finally Iran. Yet nothing is in fact settled in these arenas. Terror is still striking in Judea and Samaria, and the Houthies in Yemen keep launching missiles and blockading the strategic strait of Bab el-Mandeb. Most distressing of all, the Gaza war is now creeping towards the 2-year mark, with hostages still in captivity and the Islamist Hamas still desperately clinging on to power. So looking at this entire geostrategic picture, including its foreign policy backdrop, how should we best sum up Israel's current situation? Joining us to dissect these matters are Major General in Reserve Yaakov Amidrol, who formerly served as Israel's National Security Advisor, currently a Distinguished Fellow at the Ginza Center at Washington, D.C., as well as the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security here in the Israeli capital. It's great to see you, General.
Nice to have with you.
Also joining us is Professor Russell Berman from across the pond, who formerly served as a senior advisor at the U.S. State Department's policy planning staff, currently the director of the Middle East and Islamic World Working Group at Hoover Institution at Stanford University. It's great to see you, Russell.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
It's always a pleasure to have you both. And with us here also in the studio, last but not least, our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, the geostrategic landscape, of course, always starts at strategic power competition, which in essence is global, to include, of course, the United States, China, to a lesser degree, albeit they secondary actors, Russia, the Europeans. But ultimately, a regional rivalry also is quite raging at this point in time, particularly between Israel and the Islamic Republic of Iran, but also Turkey emerging as a major contender in this whole mix. Lay it out for us in layman's terms to better start these conversations with clear defined structures.
You know, it was reported recently that several former colonies of European powers in Asia and Africa are demanding that a new map of the world be published because they believe that the sizes of the various countries has been wrongly depicted to their detriment. They want to be seen as bigger than the Europeans and perhaps North Americans have seen them. But be it as it may, the United States is still almost the only power with influence in the Middle East. Definitely the leading power, and President Trump is calling the shots. And the others have some influence, whether on their own. For instance, the sort of the arms embargo, not a total one, a partial one, that Germany has imposed on Israel for various reasons, or declarations by French President Macron and others.
Don't forget the arms embargo by Slovenia and Spain, very impactful.
And Canada and Australia have spoken, but this is really immaterial. What has an impact is what happens in Washington, at the White House, out of the Oval Office. And for the time being, President Trump is stoutly behind the policy of the current government of Israel. And even though he had some cryptic remark the other day that the war in Gaza should be over in a couple of weeks, we have yet to see any signs on the ground that this is happening.
Indeed. Well, Professor Berman, I'd like to ask you from an American perspective. Just recently, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, who is the Senior Director at the National Security Council for Counterterrorism, provided a glimpse into the perspective of the Trump administration from the offices of Hudson Institute in Washington, during the course of which he highlighted that when we're talking about the Middle East, for America, first, second, and third considerations start and end with the Islamic Republic of Iran. Is that still the case today?
I think looking at the Middle East from an American perspective, the first point to underscore, which has already been mentioned, is that the United States is the hegemonic power. Matters have clearly not been resolved in the Middle East, and things could still go south, excuse me, to the global south. But once upon a time, people talked about a quartet. Once upon a time, one talked about the role of Russia. Uh, Hard to imagine. People even thought that the European Union mattered. All of that is so 20th century. It no longer matters right now. The decisions that are relevant in the world are um, are made in Washington. Um, the United States foreign policy, certainly the Trump administration, is firmly committed to Israel. You've mentioned that already, Jonathan. But aside from Israel, the issue is, as Gorka apparently said, is Iran. Iran is um, well, I guess one of the most populous countries in the region. Egypt has a greater population. It has greater technological capacity. Its labor force is more educated, etc. It's also strategically located in the gateway as a gateway to Central Asia. A key factor that's going to become significant, I believe, in the coming years is the consequences of the Armenia-Azerbaijan rapprochement, which is going to open up a pathway for Turkey into Central Asia. Turkey is a NATO partner of the United States, a major military force led by a difficult president who has complicated aspirations both to his west and to his east. So yes, Iran is the key issue in the region, but it's not the only issue.
Absolutely. Well, it speaks volumes to utilize the word or choose the word partner rather than ally, which in this context is indeed due to the problematic relationship, despite differently stated by the White House between President Trump and his Turkish counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan, which, when we boggle it down, ultimately comes down to foreign policy differences on multiple scales. But nonetheless, General Midro, from an Israeli perspective, Israel is fully aligned with the United States, particularly also when it comes to the Islamic Republic of Iran and the concerns, justifiably so, of the Ayatollah regime seeking to attain nuclear weapon capabilities.
I think that this phenomenon was not so clear before the 7th of October, and people intend to say that there are big differences between the United States of America and Israel, but I think that the success of Israel in this war, the success of Israel to almost destroy Hezbollah, the fact that because of this achievement, the regime in Damascus disappeared and another regime came in, more connected to Turkey, breaking the bridge between Iran and the Mediterranean by getting out of this alliance of the Shiites and put both Iran and Hezbollah in a very delicate situation. Iran cannot help Hezbollah today. It can bring money, of course, but not weapon systems. And they totally lost their influence in Syria. And last but not least, the success of Israel by itself to achieve control of the skies of Tehran. You know, many people ask, can Israel harm the nuclear project? And Israel showed everyone that Israel can. Of course, we are more than happy that the Americans did what they did in Fordo, but other than Fordo, Israel made the whole operation by itself. All the airplanes are American made, but the whole operation was made by Israel, and the success is enormous. So I think that today it is better understood around the world that this alliance between Israel and America is a very strong alliance, but Israel by itself is maybe, or maybe probably have the ability to defend itself, even if the Americans remain passive outside. It is easier when the Americans are in. The 2 batteries of THAAD in Israel were very helpful. The fact the Americans neutralized Fordo was crucial. But the first 12 days of the war, 11 days of the war in Iran show that Israel has many capabilities that Israel can use, even if the Americans stay out. And I think that this combination is better understood in America, and America understands how important is the position of Israel in the Middle East for the future of the Middle East, is kind of anchor of stabilization in the area. And what will happen because of all the changes in the Levant, the change in Damascus, will the Americans succeed to convince the Lebanese government to get rid of Hezbollah totally, to disarm Hezbollah? How long the Gaza war will continue? If at the end Israel will succeed to disarm Hamas are very important questions. But the fact that Iran is much weaker today is a different situation from the Israeli point of view, from the Middle East point of view, and I think from the international community point of view.
Absolutely. Mr. Oren.
Building on what General Amidror said, 2 trends have converged to revolutionize the American-Israeli military alliance. One is Israel's participation at CENTCOM, the U.S. Central Command, moving out of EUCOM, which is, of course, co-located with NATO, and the weakening of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. NATO is today much less important than it was even a few years ago. And the happy fact that Israel is not aligned or allied with NATO, with Turkish intervention, with other factors, but rather Israel is the most important military power after the United States at CENTCOM. And this has been apparent under General McKenzie first, General Kurilla for the last several years. He had great impact. And now Admiral Cooper, who used to head the Fifth Fleet and then was Kurilla's deputy. This has made what General Amidror described a very potent alliance.
Absolutely. Well, Professor Berman, I'd like to ask you specifically, since if we rewind somewhat to the point where we had the crash of the helicopter in Iran, where we saw Ibrahim Raisi, the then president, and his top diplomat, Hossein Amir Abdullahian, pretty much dropped to their death, and immediately they had to bring about a new election with a new parliament, a new reformed government, supposedly, of the reformists entering into office despite having no daylight between themselves and the Ayatollah or the leading figures within the Ayatollah regime. It was immediately also stated that the 2 core principles on which the Ayatollah regime rests are, first and foremost, and this is with regard to their foreign policy, removing the United States from the region, namely the removal of the American hegemonism, as they term it in literal translation, and to deepen Iranian foothold throughout neighboring countries, but also beyond that. Now, those 2 aspects have been the core of Iranian foreign policy, and they continue to be adamant on pursuing those policies, the counter to which would be no less than the American spearheaded Abraham Accords, to see Israel further integrated into the region with additional partners and allies of the United States. But within the current climate, do you see America prevail in pushing that strategy, or is it going to look for alternative means?
Do you mean, will America prevail or Iran prevail? What was your question?
Will America prevail?
Listen, I think Iran's strategic thinking, as you summarized it, just has not caught up with reality yet. There was a time not that long ago when Iran was indeed a genuine threat, when it could rely on the Hezbollah insurance policy, et cetera, the Shiite Crescent. All that is in the past. The leadership in Tehran certainly won't announce it publicly. I can't believe that there aren't smart strategists in the upper echelons in Tehran who indeed understand that and are trying to figure out the next step. The next step would be for Iran to accommodate reality with a revised strategy. It would certainly be possible to maintain a dictatorship without having an aggressive anti-Western, anti-Israel foreign policy. Think of Saudi Arabia. Certainly not a model democracy, but not hostile either to Israel or to the United States. That would be a possible pathway for Iran, but Iran is not paying me to be its consultant. The United States is clearly on a winning trajectory in the Middle East. There is much, as I said before, still unresolved. The situation in Lebanon is not complete. Who knows what will become of al-Shara in Damascus? Will he become a Turkish client, or will he move more in a liberal Western direction? It's open. He can make the right choice, and he can make the wrong choice. Similarly, the Hamas is enormously degraded. If Hamas and its supporters in Doha and even in Cairo really cared about the Gazans, they would convince the Hamas leadership to give up and get on a boat to Qatar. If there were really a famine, Egypt could open its doors and feed the Gazans in Sinai. But as so often, politicians in the region have a hard time to grasp reality.
Thank you, Professor Berman. General Amidror. Meanwhile, we do see the Americans in the process of dissolving, so to speak, Operation Inherent Resolve in their battle against the Islamic State, both withdrawals in Syria, leaving just a very small contingent currently with the intentions of removing all of them at some point, and the intentions of a withdrawal from Iraq after already limiting the mandate to just an advisory role, and just next month we expect to see them leave Iraq altogether. Would that not grant the Iranians the aspired footprint or vacuum in Iraq to fill the void and then exploit that for additional expansionist aspirations, if you will?
The truth is that if that question had been asked 2 years ago, the answer was clear. Iran will win, will enter to the vacuum, and Iraq is doomed. But what I see in Iraq since the end of the first year of the war, and more so after the 12 days operation of Israel in Iran, in Iraq, people understand that Iran is much weaker. They stop allowing the Shiite militias to launch projectiles into Israel. Since last November, nothing was launched from Iraq. They didn't let the Iranians to cross Iraq with forces to save the regime in Damascus. So the decision makers in Iraq, maybe with some help from the Americans, understand that Iran is much weaker, and if they not behave in a way which is not threatening Israel, they might pay a huge price. And they see the ability of Israel to reach the area and to do whatever we think should be done. So the question today is very hard to answer. I am not sure that the Iraqis that at the beginning don't like the Farsis of Iran. They are both Shiites, but it is different Shiites, and the Arabs don't like the Farsis, the Iranians. And there is a rivalry between leaders of Shiites in Iraq and Sistani, for example, and others in Iran. So I don't know. It's a question that today it's very hard to answer. It very much depends how strong the Americans will remain in their ability to convince the regime that the regime will pay high price if they let the Iranians to control Baghdad.
So you're saying the Sadrists are currently in the lead within this Shiite community in Iraq?
I don't know yet because we don't understand yet the results of the 12-day war against Iran. Look, the smart people around the Middle East understand the Iranians didn't deliver. They didn't deliver when they didn't succeed to save Hezbollah. They didn't deliver when they didn't succeed to save Assad. They didn't deliver in Iran when we gained control of the skies of Tehran after 48 hours. And they don't deliver today water to the population. So it's very hard to understand now what is the exact situation in both in Tehran, and more than that, more complicated and more puzzling in Baghdad.
Indeed. Well, just for the sake of our viewers, the Sadrist movement under Muqtada al-Sadr is a large portion of the Shiites in Iran. They see themselves as a type of nationalists. They're not pro-Western in any sense, but they're also not pro-Iranian. They view themselves as a compartmentalized nationalist movement of the Shiites in Iraq, and they have quite the significant or dominant force. In recent years, the Iranians have subdued them via Hashd al-Shabi, an umbrella organization of roughly 67 militias, of which 46 were loyal to the Ayatollah regime as part of the RGC Quds Force directives. But nonetheless, there is a certain loss of grip, if we may call it that way, by the IRGC over many of those organizations. We did see General Khani, the commander of the RGC Quds Force, travel on multiple occasions to Iraq to try and salvage what the Iranians have lost. But as General Amidrol has mentioned, time will tell how this will evolve. I will also highlight that for consecutive years, intelligence assessments have indicated that the major battle between the United States and Iran would occur in Iraq, in light of the fact that historically the Iranians view Iraq as the extension necessary to be defined as an actual empire, very similar to the manner in which the Russians view Ukraine in this context. But nonetheless, we're drawing near to the end of the program, and I'd like each of you to have roughly 2 minutes to provide a brief analysis for maybe a more optimistic future. How do you view the region?
I think there are lots of grounds for optimism in a way that this was not true a few years ago, certainly not true before the 12-day war. Right now, the things to watch for are primarily threefold, I believe. One is with regard to Gaza, the question as to whether the prospect of an enormous campaign against Gaza City will lead to an acceleration of the negotiations in a productive way and to the release of the hostages. The rational thing to do, as I said before, would be to convince the Hamas leadership that it's time to give up. Whether the Qataris or the Egyptians can succeed in that is an open question. Second, there's a prospect for for at least a rapprochement, if not more, between Jerusalem and Damascus. This is the al-Shara question that really has not been clarified since he came to power. Is he going to be true to his Irhabi, to his terrorist roots, or is he going to behave like his suit and become a genuine player in the in international politics? And third, as has already been mentioned once, whether the Lebanese government will finally man up and tell and get and be able to disarm Hezbollah. It's all been set up, right? The ball has been pitched. They just have to swing the bat and hit it.
Thank you, Professor Berman. General Amidrol, the last 2 minutes are yours.
I think that based on what the professor said, we can see a huge change in the Levant. There is a potential there. It will happen or not, we don't know. But the potential is there, and it very much depends on how the Americans will use the cards that Israel provided them in its operations, both in Lebanon and in Iran. And there is another issue that had not been mentioned by the professor, and this is Iran itself. And as I said, the Iranians didn't deliver, the Iranian regime didn't deliver all around the Middle East, including in Iran itself, domestically. How far it will be taken by the people of Iran? And I don't know if they can, if they want, if they have the energy, and if the regime is weak enough to be changed. There are some rumors, some voices. The potential is there. Here, the influence of Israel in America is less relevant, much less relevant. But I think that we should look at it, and whenever we can, to encourage those who are acting or demonstrating against the regime. We cannot make the regime change without the local people, but we can help the local people to understand that regime change is a possibility that they can go in.
I will point two things about this specifically. The first one, the regime is aware of this and is working tirelessly. I think they're reporting themselves the incarceration of between 22 to 24,000 Iranians just during the course of the 12-day war, which indicates their paranoia. And another aspect to this, Turkey does not want to see regime change in Iran, and it's going to work to block that for various of its own perceived interests, also a context of rivalry between Ankara and Jerusalem as it is perceived in Turkey today. But this is all the time that we have for today, and this topic we will discuss also further at length, since there are vast-reaching implications of it. I'd like to immediately thank Professor Berman and General Amidrol for all of your insights today. And I'd like to thank TV7's editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren, also, and all of you at home as well. Until our next edition, from here in Jerusalem, Shalom.